Following the release of conflicting statements about the health of the Zulu King Misuzulu KaZwelithini and his whereabouts, there are questions about the management of information around him and what it means for his throne. Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the traditional prime minister to the AmaZulu monarch and nation, said at the weekend that the king had gone to Eswatini for treatment following the death of one of his senior advisors through suspected poisoning. The king's spokesperson, Prince Africa Zulu, hit back, alleging that there was an orchestrated agenda and a desperate narrative to communicate defamatory and baseless claims of His Majesty's health. Yesterday, the king released a video explaining that he travelled to Eswatini for a regular medical checkup and reminded his subjects to not listen to everything that people say. Buthelezi released his own statement some hours ago, insisting that nowhere did he suggest that His Majesty the King was critically ill. And tellingly, he also decried what he termed unbecoming behaviour of Prince Zulu and his conduct in a recorded conversation in which he is seen interjecting the king. Professor Musa Xulu joins the program now to share his perspectives on this. Professor, good evening and welcome to you. Prince Buthelezi's statement says Prince Africa Zulu is keeping things from the AmaZulu nation and of lying. As you read his statement and the developments that have transpired over the last few days, what does it tell you tonight about the relationship between Prince Buthelezi and the royal house?
The relationship between, good evening to yourself and your viewers. The relationship between Prince Buthelezi and the rest of the Zulu royal house is perfect. He meets with them frequently, and I think some 3 or 4 weeks ago, he addressed them in a very long meeting at Ulunde. However, over the past 3 or 4 months, and we did raise this issue in April, there has been a rift, an apparent rift, and it expresses itself almost weekly as it becomes more and more widening between His Majesty the King and Prince Buthelezi. Now, the rift started to show up around the issues of Ingonyama Trust, but now it looks like any issue. For example, every time Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi issues a statement to the nation, you can rest assured that Prince Africa will release a counter statement. Now, it's just a pity that the counter statement is about the health of the king, and so you spend the whole weekend debating whether the king is in good health or is not in good health. The problem that has happened as a result of this is that there is a trend towards the rest of the Zulu royal house moving away from the king, and because they feel that he is not engaging them as a group. There is also a trend of Amakhosi, especially the core of Amakhosi in the districts where the Zulu kingdom was started in the 1800s. For example, here on the north coast, in Zululand, in Mzinyati, King Cetshwayo, etc. For those and the Amabuto structures to move away from the king as a person and a focus away. Now, the Zulu kingdom is a federal kingdom. It's built of several Amakhosi chiefdoms, which are very independent on their own, and they're only subscribing to the wider concept of the Zulu kingdom as was started by King Shaka. King Shaka did not disestablish any of the chieftainships except those that were resisted. Now this rift, I think, is moving the Zulu kingdom towards the precipice. That's what I can say.
I mean, that's quite a strong statement that you're sharing there. And you're saying it's deeply rooted in history, in time, you know, way before the contemporary time that we are in right now. You talked about the Ingonyama Trust. Just talk to us about, you know, the theatre of suspicion and connection around the Ingonyama Trust and what themes are at play there vis-a-vis the Royal House.
Well, Ingonyama Trust, as you know, its history, 1994, it was started by the KwaZulu homeland, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, so that the land that was under the homeland remains in the hands of the Zulu people in a traditional system of land ownership, which means that the Amakhosi, the chiefs, are presiding over the land. And then, of course, in a federal system, the king himself is an Inkosi of Osotho. So he presides only over that land, not over the entire land. He cannot, for example, go to because of another clan and said he wants to make use of this land in this and this way, the Act prohibits him from doing so, because the Act is derived from traditions that have been there since even before the times of King Shaka. So the Ingonyama Trust is a side issue, really, except for that land is central to the liberation struggle in South Africa. But it is not the appointment or not appointment of the board could have been negotiated better than it was. It's now water under the bridge. I can't see it becoming corrected in a manner that it could have been. But it has led to tensions of the West Order between Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi and His Majesty, and even revelations of meetings that they held between them and who behaved what, who banged the table and who did what and so on. Some kind of washing of the dirty linen in public. So once those things happen, sometimes what you would need is some kind of intervention in the form of mediation. Otherwise, I can tell now that the rift is becoming, is not helping towards building a better Zulu kingdom. And as you remember, my sister, many people throughout South Africa, non-Zulus, Africa, and in the diaspora, the Zulu brand is a well-known brand in terms of traditional leadership system.
Again, and sorry, Prof, it's just, again, as always, we're up against the clock, but there's some really concerning themes that you are sharing with us tonight. But if we can also just go back then to what exemplifies some of these schisms that you're talking about. Prince Buthelezi expressing concerns, for example, that protocols were not conformed to when making decisions about the King's movement, that the royal family, the Premier of the province, or even the head of states were informed that the King would be out of the country. Given this backdrop that you've painted for us and how events seem to have played themselves out, how serious would this be to have not, if the Prince Buthelezi's narration is accurate, how serious would this be?
It would be very serious because it compromises the security of the King, which should not be entertained at all, because you must remember that the King has got many in the royal family itself who have taken him to court and so on. I'm not saying we can suspect them for anything, but his position, and there has been in the past couple of weeks a situation where he had to be moved from one place where he was living in to a secure place because there were fears for his life. Now, if suddenly he moves up and down and then the protocols of state, because he's an extension of the state, he gets salaried by the state. The protocols of state are not observed. That's very dangerous. It's not something that should be taken lightly.
What do you say, before we go, because we're almost out of time, Professor Xulu, given all of these different machinations, the seriousness with which you say these developments should be seen, the concern about the brand of the AmaZulu King and nation being at risk tonight, the security and the confidence that the AmaZulu nation has in their king, very, very important themes, again, that transcend this moment. In the video that was released last night, I don't know if you have seen the portion as pertaining to you, with the King saying that people have come out about you specifically, saying that there was a lot of things in social media that are being claimed to have been mandated by him. But I think the point was what Prince Afrika said, that it had come to the King's attention that you yourself, Prof, was arranging conferences or an investment conference, and that the King did not know about it. While I have you on the line, would just love your perspective on this.
No, thank you very much. No, I loved that a lot because it's just devoid of truth. The issue is the conference, the Zulu Kingdom Investment Conference, was organized for the 29th of November last year, after the King summoned me to Durban at the hotel of Mr. Musa Xulu, where he asked, what do we do now that all the cultural things are done? And I said to him, you remember we had spoken about you getting involved with the economic development issues. And then he said, can you organize a conference for that as a start? I want to rebrand myself as someone who is looking after the economic welfare of his people. So I don't know where they got it from, but I laughed at it because it was always in the open, and I don't want to get into details then about it because I respect His Majesty the King.
How well would you say you two know each other?
I've known, look, I arrived at the Zulu Royal House in 1988 as a Master of Music student studying ethnomusicology and recording Zulu Amahubo songs. I got introduced on that day. It was a traditional Zulu wedding for His Majesty the late King. I got introduced to Buthelezi and the late King, and so I got used to Buthelezi and the late King. All my works which I compose, I always went to introduce to the late King, House of Shaka, etc., etc. King Misuzulu as a prince did not stay at home for a long time, but you must remember that when he came out in 2021, and we had to start conducting research about his suitability, culturally speaking, whether it was him. We conducted lots of research on that and found out that he was born to be the king in terms of cultures and traditions of the Zulu kingdom. So, and I've appeared a lot of times here on TV to express that. I've met with him many, many times. The last time we spoke was yesterday morning. He called me and we spoke about the current issues. And I pointed out to him that there are problems in the kingdom, and he agreed with me.
This is King Misuzulu.
Yes, yes. And I was surprised when I then saw that video and so on. I'm not yet an edition of that conference, but I plan to organize it, and at the right time I'll talk.
Does it concern you that he appears to, well, says that he doesn't know you? Not closely, but from a distance?
Well, I don't know what distance is. Why would he call me yesterday if he doesn't know me? He knows me very well.
Okay.
When we went there to meet with him, he called me, and then I said, because I know these things always need a second person, I went with my son. So that's where he issued the instruction. And he was very grateful about the role that I played in ensuring that his role gets explained to the nation. There is just no problem. I think I can say what's happening, but it's such a small thing, really. I wouldn't bother about it.
Prof. Musa Xulu, thank you very much for talking to us tonight and for the clarification or your explanation at the end. The cultural expert and Heritage Development Trust Executive Director, Professor Musa Xulu.